My name is Narissa. I'm 54 years old, living in Chicago, and I devoted nearly 3 decades of my life to an investment firm I once considered family. But on a Monday morning, under the glare of boardroom lights and the familiar faces of colleagues, I was asked to stand, handed a bouquet of flowers, and gracefully retire. No warning. No heartfelt thank you. And certainly no one mentioned that my name had been quietly removed from the multi-million-dollar contract I had spent months negotiating. Have you ever been cast aside without explanation by someone you trusted most? Watched your entire career vanish in just a few minutes without understanding why? If you've ever felt betrayed by life itself, share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what happened next is something you won't want to miss. I started working at Myers when I was 28 with waist-length hair, a heart full of dedication, and a notebook that never left my side. Back then, the company had barely a dozen employees, operating out of a dusty old building in northern Chicago. There were no glossy presentations or automated data systems like today. Everything was built with persistence and bare hands. I didn't have a fancy MBA or an Ivy League diploma like most of my later colleagues. What I had was the ability to notice what others missed, small details that earned the trust of people managing hundreds of millions of dollars. I remember the first time I was assigned to the Whitmore Medical Group account. Dean Whitmore, the firm's chairman, was known for being demanding and not trusting anyone under 40. When I walked into his office to present a plan for restructuring their internal investment fund, he stared at me silently before coldly asking, "Do you even know how much the private healthcare market dropped this quarter?" I didn't hesitate. 11% overall, but only 4% in the Great Lakes region. And you're positioned advantageously because your clinic chain is right where population growth is surging. He nodded. That was the first time I saw him smirk. 3 months later, he called me his radar girl. 8 years after that, he said I was the only reason he still held a contract with Myers. Relationships like that aren't built over a dinner or a templated email. They're formed through 10 p.m. phone calls, remembering a client's daughter's birthday, sending congratulations when they got promoted. I knew who wanted a 2-page summary and who preferred a 35-point breakdown. I knew when to speak and, more importantly, when to stay silent. In this industry, knowing when not to talk can preserve contracts worth tens of millions. Gregory Myers, the founding CEO, was the first to recognize that. He wasn't like traditional founders. No cigars, no flashy watches. But his gaze could see through anyone. "You remind me of my mother," he once said when I declined a bonus after a major deal closed. "She never asked for anything. She just made people believe she couldn't be replaced." He always called me the company's eyes and ears. When I proposed a cyclical client care model tied to financial periods, he didn't ask many questions. He simply said, "Do it. If it fails, I'll take responsibility." And from that moment on, I never let him take responsibility for anything I did. Together, we built a proactive client care system, each account with a detailed psychological profile, emotional trend analysis, and trust metrics, not because clients demanded it, but because I believed in staying a step ahead. For over 20 years, I didn't have a proper Christmas break. Every year, I flew to at least 3 different states to attend shareholder meetings, sometimes just to shake hands or listen to a few words, then fly home. One year, I spent New Year's Eve in a hotel lobby in Denver, one hand holding a reporting call, the other clutching a lukewarm coffee. But I never once complained. I didn't do it for internal evaluations. I did it because I was proud. I watched the company grow from a dusty third-floor office into a national asset management firm. From just 3 contracts to over 500 corporate clients. In nearly every client loyalty ranking, my name was always at the top. Not because I was the best, but because I was the most consistent. Then Gregory retired. His farewell party took place at a hotel overlooking Lake Michigan. I gave a speech on behalf of the client services team. He looked at me, raised his glass, and said, "If one day I'm no longer here, there's only one person I'd trust with this network, and that's you." I laughed at the time, assuming he was being sentimental. I didn't realize that 6 months later, those words would cut deeper than I could have imagined. Chase Landon appeared like a cold spring wind, young, confident, and sharp enough to be mistaken for brilliance. I once heard Gregory say, "He's talented but not ready." Chase had been engaged to Gregory's daughter, a relationship that ended quietly, but left echoes throughout the company. No one spoke of it, but everyone knew. I never had any issues with him. When Chase started appearing in board meetings, I remained respectful. But I could feel his eyes on me every time I spoke, as if measuring every word, not to understand but to find fault. One early fall afternoon, I walked into a meeting and saw my name missing from the client strategy development team for the upcoming year. I asked the assistant. She looked down and blushed. I thought you already knew. No announcement. No discussion. Bit by bit, my role was being erased, like a photocopy fading one page at a time. I used to think someone like me couldn't be replaced. But I forgot that to those who don't value the past, the present is just another cost to cut. And I am not a number. But they forgot that. Or maybe they never saw it in the first place. I left the Colburn Myers building that afternoon in silence, a small box in hand with just a few photos, an old fountain pen, and the ceramic mug I'd used for 20 years. No one walked me out, except for the awkward glance from the new receptionist who had been there for only 2 months. I stepped out into the street, summer sun pouring down on the pavement like it was burning through my hollow thoughts. Back home, I turned on my personal laptop. My internal account was locked, not surprising. But what left me stunned was that the emails I had sent, the strategic documents I had crafted over the years, were completely gone from my personal cloud backup. I didn't understand how, unless someone had deliberately wiped them. I called IT. No response. I called HR. Voicemail. I tried accessing the company's backup system using the admin-level credentials I had been granted long ago. Access denied. It felt like someone had taken an eraser to the history I had helped build. At 3 a.m., I sat in front of a dark screen, my eyes dry. Part of me stayed calm, knowing I was probably being monitored. The other part refused to let emotion win. That's when my phone rang. The caller ID read Amber McConnell, the head of data analytics, one of the few who never got involved in the company's power games. She had always kept just the right distance, neither flattering nor bitter. I answered. Before I could speak, she whispered like she didn't want to be overheard. "Narissa, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said quietly. "Though I doubt you called at this hour just to ask that." Amber took a deep breath. "I probably shouldn't say this. But, you need to know." "Know what?" "Your entire client portfolio. Everything from Winters Group to Whitmore Medical was reassigned this morning. To Todd Turner's team." I sat up straight. Todd? The guy who'd only been around for 2 years. More known for his slide decks than his strategic thinking? "That's impossible," I said. "Those contracts explicitly require the lead liaison to be me, or someone I personally assign. You were removed from the system this morning." Chase had everything re-registered under new names. "They're prepping an internal report for the upcoming shareholder meeting. All the growth metrics will reflect under the new team." She paused, then added softly, "I know it's not fair." I said nothing. Everything was clear now. Chase hadn't just removed me, he was rewriting history. Building a legacy on the very foundation I had laid with years of sweat and silence. Amber kept talking, but I wasn't really listening. My eyes had drifted to a message that just appeared on my phone screen. "Don't let him get his hands on the Prudence Fund." No name. No sender info. Just that single urgent warning. I read it again and again. My chest tightened. The Prudence Fund wasn't just another investment vehicle. It was the heart of a mission I started 8 years ago, after my mother died of ovarian cancer, unable to afford access to experimental treatments due to financial barriers. I had co-founded the fund with a group of doctors and investors. Its purpose was to provide financial support for women who couldn't afford experimental treatment therapies. The fund was named after my mother, Prudence. We partnered with the Mid-North Health System to vet recipients, and the entire account was placed in a non-profit trust arrangement, legally barred from being used for commercial purposes. Except by someone who knew how to bypass the control system. I reopened old emails, digging through the archived correspondence with the finance department from when we registered the Prudence Fund under the company's CSA, Corporate Social Responsibility, portfolio. One of the individuals who had modified the clauses was none other than Chase Landon. At the time, he was the head of community strategy. "Amber," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "do you still have access to the complete archive of the CSR funds?" "Not directly, but I can borrow admin access for about an hour." Why? I think Chase is trying to do something with the Prudence Fund. If he's using a charitable fund to launder money, then. Amber cut in, then it's not just an internal issue anymore. That's a federal offense. I hung up after asking her to send all retrievable data to me via a secure link. My heart was racing, but my mind was cold and sharp, like every step I had taken in that boardroom for decades. I was no longer the woman forced out of an office in disgrace. I was the one who knew every inch of the system they were trying to manipulate. Chase thought I would stay quiet. He believed that by erasing my name from spreadsheets and reports, I would vanish. He didn't realize there are things he can't delete. And the Prudence Fund was one of them. I was sitting in my kitchen, laptop open in front of me, a cup of cold coffee by my hand when my phone rang. The caller ID said Dean Whitmore. I immediately straightened in my seat, heart tightening. Dean had been one of my most loyal clients, a tough man who ran the Whitmore Care network of private hospitals, and the first to ever publicly state in a meeting, "If Nerissa leaves, we'll reevaluate our entire partnership." I answered the call. "Dean," I said gently, "it's so good to hear your voice." "I just got word, from a very reliable source," he said bluntly, "that you've left Colburn Myers." "I didn't leave. I was pushed out." A short silence. Then he sighed. "Then it's true. But that's not why I'm calling." "I'm listening." "I received an email from Todd Turner this morning. He introduced himself as the new account manager for our file. When I asked why, he said, 'Due to internal financial investigations related to you.'" Dean's words felt like they closed around my throat. I thought I'd misheard. "Financial investigation?" I asked slowly. "He said that outright?" "I still have the email. I know you better than anyone, so I don't believe it. But if Chase is spreading this to every client on the list, you need to know." I clenched the handle of my ceramic mug, my voice hoarse with anger. "Thank you, Dean. Truly. I'll get to the bottom of this. I'll be waiting to hear from you. And if they think they can use that to pressure us into renewing under new management, I'll make sure they're in for a surprise." I hadn't even ended the call when a text from Sarah Lynn, CEO of Medianix Tech Group, popped up. "Nerissa, what's going on? Todd Turner just told me you're temporarily restricted from communication. Are you really under investigation?" I nearly broke down from sheer frustration. Chase hadn't just stolen credit. He was twisting the truth, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of people I'd built deeper bonds with than my own family. He wasn't just trying to sideline me. He wanted to erase my reputation, my credibility, and my presence in the hearts of my clients. I called Sarah back. "It's me. No, there is no financial investigation. No misconduct whatsoever. I was let go because they want to restructure and transfer my accomplishments to someone else to pad the financial reports." Sarah was quiet, then said, "I believe you. But I want to see proof. And if you need anything, I have my own legal team." That gave me a surge of strength. I opened my contacts and found a name I hadn't used in years. Kevin Bram, former head of internal security at Colburn Myers. We used to work in perfect sync before he left for another firm 3 years ago. I messaged, "Kevin, I need help. Urgently. Regarding the internal email system at CM." 3 minutes later he called. "You just got booted, didn't you?" Kevin asked directly, his tone half curious, half angry on my behalf. I was pushed out without any formal reason. And now they're spreading rumors of a financial investigation to justify replacing me. "Kevin, I need to recover internal emails, especially exchanges with clients over the last 6 months. I know CM had a shadow backup on the old servers. You set up the private backup back then." Kevin gave a dry laugh. "Do you remember what I told you on my last day?" I nodded slightly, though he couldn't see. "Don't trust Chase. Back then you just smiled. I think now it's time I help you get a little justice." Kevin sent me a secure link. Through it, he accessed the old storage software, the one that saved auto drafts of emails before they were sent or deleted. We spent over 3 hours combing through message fragments and metadata. He pointed to a chain between Chase, Todd Turner, and the strategic management team. "Read this line." I squinted at the text. "Need to create public distance between the company brand and Nerissa, especially ahead of next quarter's investor meetings. Suggested phrasing. Subtly reference, reviewing legacy financial records." I felt a chill down my spine. Kevin scrolled further. "Here, An internal note that was never sent but still in the draft cache. Chase wrote, "If former clients ask, just say she's under temporary review. Limit contact as much as possible. They'll accept the new lead faster if kept in ambiguity." I clenched my fist. This wasn't just fabrication. He had a full internal PR campaign built to eliminate me by manufacturing doubt. It was systematic defamation. "What do you want me to do with this?" Kevin asked. "I want every bit of this backed up, encrypted, and sent to my private legal counsel. And I need to know if there's a way to trace all client-facing emails Todd sent that mention my name." Kevin nodded. No further words needed. We kept working until nearly dawn. I didn't know exactly how I'd use this yet. But I knew one thing for sure. Every lie, no matter how carefully crafted, leaves a trace. And I would follow that trace, not for revenge, but to pull the truth into the light, before it's too late. I was reorganizing my workspace in the apartment, printed files from the old archive neatly sorted into folders. Outside the window, a heavy rain had started falling over Chicago. It was one of those slow, steady downpours that made the streets feel quieter than usual. I had just received confirmation from my lawyer. Those internal emails, the leaked notes, all of it had been safely stored and prepped for any potential legal proceedings. The phone rang just as I was closing the last folder. Unknown number. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking up. "Hello, Miss Narissa. This is Elijah Burnett." A deep, steady male voice, immediately recognizable. Elijah was the CEO of Newcrest Capital, a direct rival of Colburn Myers for the past decade. We'd crossed paths many times at high-level investment events, usually on opposite sides of the table. Elijah was known for his cold demeanor, razor-sharp strategy, and an open admiration for the way I retained clients for him. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm. "You're not calling at this hour to offer condolences." "No. I'm calling to put a serious offer on the table." "Sounds intriguing." "I've long followed the client model you built at CM. And I know Chase Landon just made the dumbest move of his career. He's destroyed the irreplaceable value chain of that company by eliminating the person who designed it." I stayed silent. Elijah continued. "If you want to rebuild it your way, I'm ready to fund it. Name your price. You don't need board approval. You don't have to ask anyone's permission. You just need to do what you do best, build trust." I spun the pen in my fingers. The offer was too tempting and came at the perfect time. "What do you want from me?" I asked bluntly. "You know I have resources, infrastructure, and capital. But I don't have what you have, client loyalty. They follow you, not a sign on the door. I don't want to build an empire on branding. I want to build it on people. And you're the one who can bring them together." I let out a faint chuckle. "So you want me to be your empire builder?" "I want you as a partner," Elijah corrected, his tone more composed. "An independent entity, operating separately but with full backing from Newcrest. If you agree." I didn't answer right away. After the call ended, I sat in silence. Part of me had sworn not to act out of emotion against Chase. I didn't want to become a ghost haunted by revenge. But the other part, the one holding internal emails exposing fabricated investigations, the one tracking financial manipulation of the Prudence Fund, couldn't stay silent anymore. I reopened the anonymous warning from the other day. The numbers Amber and I found in the fund's ledger showed at least 3 suspicious transfers from the Prudence Fund to an unidentified shell company, where the new CFO of CM happened to hold shares. This wasn't just an ethical breach. It was criminal. I called Elijah back the next morning. "I'm in," I said simply. "Great. When would you like to meet my legal team?" "Tonight. But with one condition." "Name it." "Full authority. Across the board. I'll rebuild the model from scratch. I'll choose the people. And if any client wants to follow me, they come in without reapproval. No compromises." Elijah chuckled. "You always talk like you never left the battlefield." "Fine. Condition accepted. I'll need a temporary office, tech support staff, and a security platform robust enough to relaunch my client system within 10 days. I'll handle it all. You'll have whatever you need. And one more thing." Elijah paused for a second. "I want you to understand, this isn't about Chase. I don't care about past wins or losses. I'm investing in someone I believe can redefine the playing field." I nodded even though he couldn't see it. I understand. And I'm not doing this for revenge either. I'm doing it because I can't let my mother's name be turned into a tool for money laundering. Elijah, I said slowly, we're not just rebuilding a company. We're about to redefine what trust means in this industry. I couldn't ask for more, he replied. See you tonight. I set the phone down. The rain had stopped, the sky was starting to clear. Under the early morning sunlight, I opened a blank folder. This time there was no Colburn-Myers logo in the top left corner. Everything would start with my name. And the people I chose to believe in. I signed the partnership agreement with Newcrest Capital on a quiet Monday afternoon. The temporary office was on the 12th floor of a glass tower on the west side of Chicago, still half-settled, desks mismatched, but to me, it was the launch pad for something entirely new. Not a retaliation but a quiet statement: real value can't be erased. I spent the first 2 days reviewing names of former colleagues, people who had once worked with me at Colburn-Myers but had left quietly out of frustration with the new regime. I called Valerie Adams, the former head of Southwest Regional Strategy, who had resigned just 6 months after Chase took over because no suggestions beyond the report template were allowed anymore. Valerie was the only one I knew who could turn a dry spreadsheet into a strategic story that won clients in 10 minutes. She picked up after 2 rings. It's really you? Valerie asked, sounding stunned. I'm rebuilding. No labels, no investor boards. And I need you. She burst out laughing genuinely. So someone finally broke the wall. I'm in. And I'm bringing Louise, my old coordinator. She quit when Todd stripped nearly all our team's access. I also called Marcus Quinn, a seasoned investment analyst who had been put on mandatory leave by Chase for opposing the merger of 2 funds with clear conflict of interest risks. I thought I'd left this industry for good, Marcus said, until your name popped up. Within a week I'd gathered a core team of 8. None were flashy stars, but each was a crucial piece that the old system had dismissed. They didn't just come for me, they came with a hunger to do it right this time. We didn't start with gimmicks. No press releases. No glossy brochures. Valerie and I spent 3 sleepless nights drafting a trust restoration model, not called client service but collaborative value assurance. Gone were bloated reports made to impress. We replaced them with real-time communication channels, where every client response was acknowledged and answered within 24 hours. No delays, no gaps. Louise, our veteran coordinator, pitched a simple yet powerful idea. Each returning client would receive a legacy packet. Not gifts, but a detailed recap of our previous collaboration, personally compiled by Marcus and me. These reports included real names, authentic moments, and above all, a promise that nothing we built together was forgotten. I sent out the first 10 packets on day 13 after opening the temporary office. 2 days later, Dean Whitmore called. You know, I've received hundreds of strategy reports, he said, but I've never read any for more than 3 minutes. Until yours. I didn't use a template, I replied. I could tell. And I'll transfer the entire contract back to you, if you're willing to rebuild from the ground up. An hour later, Sarah Lynn called too, excitement clear in her voice. I just read the packet you sent. It felt like someone reminded me why I chose to work with you in the first place. The reason we connect is because we speak like real people, not like charts. I'll have the legal team prepare the paperwork. I'm not letting this drag out another quarter. Calls started pouring in faster by the day. One Wednesday morning, just as I was having coffee with Valerie, my assistant walked in and placed a sealed red envelope in front of me. I opened it. It was a letter from the Illinois State Investment Development Office, an agency I'd worked with 5 years ago on a mentorship program for small and medium-sized businesses. The message was brief: we want to work with you again. And only you. I looked up at Valerie. They never send paper letters. The last time was when I wrote the governor's policy brief. Maybe they're finally remembering who actually made that success happen, she replied. Rumors began to ripple back. Some former clients didn't just transfer their contracts. They wrote public pieces in investment magazines, calling our new model a breath of fresh air, in a sector over-commercialized to the bone. Word was that Chase had started calling emergency internal meetings. Leaked reports showed Colburn-Myers' most recent quarterly revenue had dropped by 14%. Strategic clients were delaying contract renewals. One of the board members pulled capital out of the open fund, something that hadn't happened in over a decade. I didn't celebrate, but I quietly tracked every shift on my dashboard, not to count how many times they stumbled, but to know that what my team and I were building was truly making a difference. Marcus stepped into the office at 8 p.m., holding the latest client analysis report. He sat down, eyes gleaming behind his glasses. "Want to hear something interesting?" he asked. "Always." Winston Capital just sent over a proposal for strategic partnership. They were Colburn Myers' biggest investor. I paused, eyes scanning the line of green text across the datasheet. "What did they say?" I asked. "They said, we follow the creator of value, not the logo." I looked out the window at the tall buildings reflecting the city's night lights. Something was returning, not just success but trust. And to me that was enough to keep going. The annual investment gala held at the Grand Hilton in Manhattan was an event I knew by heart. Every step, every chandelier sparkle. For 10 straight years, I'd planned every detail from guest lists to the executive speech for Colburn Myers. This year I was just an attendee, at least in the minds of many. I entered the main hall in a high-neck black gown, my hair pinned neatly, expression unreadable. I spotted Chase across the room laughing with a group of Japanese investors. He wore a black suit, jade silk tie, confident and smooth as if everything was still under control. The evening began with a cocktail hour, followed by a year-end performance presentation. Figures flashed across massive LED screens. Upbeat background music filled the room with a sense of optimism. Chase stepped onto the stage as the lights dimmed. "We're proud to announce that in the last quarter, Colburn Myers achieved a client retention rate of 91%, he declared with a clear, commanding voice. "We've also successfully restructured our CSR funds to align with sustainable development strategies." I narrowed my eyes. He was talking about the charity funds, including Prudence. "Elijah Burnett from Newcrest Capital, and I want to thank all of you for standing by us during a volatile but rewarding year," Chase concluded with a smile that drew roaring applause. I caught Elijah's gaze from the VIP table. He nodded subtly. The program director stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. "And now, before we conclude tonight's presentations, we'd like to invite a representative from the Prudence Fund to share a few words. As you may know, it's one of the earliest community investment funds supporting women's healthcare in the U.S. I walked up under soft, polite applause. The spotlight hit me, and in that moment I saw everything. Familiar faces from the front rows, people who once shook my hand but now looked at me with cautious curiosity. "Good evening, everyone," I began calmly. "My name is Narissa, the founder of the Prudence Fund, now under the direct management of the Newcrest Foundation." I saw Chase's posture stiffen beneath the stage. "I'm not here to talk about the beautiful outcomes we usually hear at galas. I'm here out of responsibility. The Prudence Fund was created to help financially underserved women access experimental cancer treatments. In the past 8 years, we've funded nearly 1,000 patients across the country." The room was still. I slowly pulled a file from my envelope, careful not to make a sound. 3 months ago, we discovered a pattern of irregular transactions between the Prudence Fund and an unregistered private brokerage not authorized to operate in the healthcare sector. Through an internal audit in partnership with an independent financial review team, we confirmed that these expenditures were approved by senior staff at Colburn Myers, specifically during meetings held on March 14 and April 27 of this year. I glanced down. Chase was no longer sitting upright. He leaned back, lips tight, eyes void of their earlier gleam. "Our evidence includes internal emails, ledger summaries, and recorded meeting audio from current employees at the firm. All were submitted to the Federal Treasury's Audit Office earlier this morning." A low murmur rippled through the second row. I maintained my composed tone. "I share this here not to attack anyone. But if we're going to talk about sustainability, transparency must come first. And I believe everyone in this room, who controls billions of dollars, understands this. Nothing erodes trust faster than silence in the face of misconduct." I gave a slight nod. "Thank you all." I stepped down into a silence so thick it seemed to coat the marble floors. Elijah rose as I returned to the table, his eyes fixed on the stage. A deep male voice suddenly broke the hush. If this is true, I cannot leave my capital in the hands of leadership so reckless. I turned. It was Mr. Arthur Glenn, head of the Glen Eastwood Fund, one of Colburn Meyer's top 3 investors. He didn't wait for a response. He stood, pulled out his phone, and muttered something to his assistant. Within seconds, 3 others at his table also rose and exited the hall. I saw Chase get up, unsteady, walking away with his focus shattered. On stage, the large screen went black, leaving only the dull amber ceiling lights reflecting off the cold marble. And in that moment I knew, the walls they had built to isolate me, they had just torn down with their own hands. Not through rage but through the voice of truth. 2 days after the gala, I woke late morning to my phone buzzing nonstop. Texts flooded in, missed calls from names I hadn't expected. The Glen Eastwood Fund's media director, legal representatives from 2 former partner firms, even the private secretary of the governor of Illinois. I walked into the living room where my desk had turned into a command center. Valerie and Marcus had been there since early morning, eyes locked on dashboards tracking capital flows and investment contracts. Louise was busy rescheduling meetings with the legal team. "You should see this," Marcus said, pushing an iPad toward me with the screen already open. I looked at the headline, bold text taking up half the page of the Wall Street Ledger. Fired female executive sparks unprecedented capital flight at Colburn Myers. Below was an image of me on stage at the gala, holding a document envelope, a spotlight from behind casting a near-iconic silhouette. I read the highlighted excerpt. After a bold, revealing speech, Nerissa, abruptly dismissed without notice, has shaken the foundation of trust in Colburn Myers' leadership structure. Valerie looked up from her laptop. "Did you know that in the past 48 hours, we've received more than 16 transfer requests, including 3 major funds that had never even reached out to us before?" I nodded slowly. "We haven't sent a single outreach email." "No need," Louise interjected. "They came on their own. And many of them said outright they're not leaving because you convinced them. They're leaving because they can no longer place their trust in an institution that tried to bury the truth." I stepped closer to the window. The daylight made me squint slightly. In the distance was the skyline of Chicago, where I once stood in glass towers believing I was an indispensable part of Colburn Myers. But the truth was, being cast out was what made me realize my real value had never been tied to the company's name. It was rooted in the trust I'd spent years building. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Pamela Raines, chair of the board at Colburn Myers. Her voice was dry, devoid of pleasantries. "Nerissa, I'll be direct. We just finished an emergency session with our key shareholders. After the gala and the capital flight breaching the warning threshold, the board has decided to place Chase Landon on temporary suspension pending an internal financial investigation." I stayed quiet for a few seconds, then replied, "That's the right thing to do. But we also want to be clear on one point. Are you the one encouraging clients to withdraw?" I gave a soft laugh. "I haven't made a single phone call asking anyone to leave you. They walked away because they didn't want their names associated with deception." Pamela exhaled. "Then I have to ask, are you planning to grow your operation into a direct rival of ours?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not in competition with anyone. I'm simply rebuilding what I once believed in, on a foundation of transparency and respect for people." The call ended in silence. No thanks. No apology. But I wasn't expecting any. The truth doesn't need justification. It only needs to come into the light. Later that afternoon, our office received 9 more meeting requests from state-level investment groups. One of them came from an organization that used to be the main sponsor for Colburn Myers community outreach programs. They asked to transfer their entire collaboration to our new model, on one condition, that I stay directly involved for at least the first 3 quarters. Louise looked up from her phone. "A rep from Chicago Business Report just reached out. They want to do a feature piece on your journey." "I'm not fond of talking about myself," I said. I told them that, she smiled. "You won't need to speak. The results will speak for themselves." I sat at my desk and opened the expanding client network map. Each glowing node was proof of one thing. Trust, when built with time and sincerity, cannot be stolen by titles or power. Outside, a soft rain began to fall. Not fierce, not loud. Just enough to remind me that every storm passes. and after it does, the ground always has a chance to bloom again. I was sitting in the 27th floor conference room of the newly acquired Newcrest Capitol building in downtown, sunlight streaming through the massive glass panels, glinting off the polished oak table. Valerie was reviewing the merger contract one final time before sending it to legal, while Marcus was focused on modeling the strategic integration between two Asian client firms. I had just signed the final 3 pages of a crucial document when my phone vibrated. The name on the screen made my hand pause. Gregory Myers. I stared at it, like the name carried an entire chapter of youth folded tightly away in a drawer. The man who once mentored me, who once embodied professional integrity for me, was now calling at a moment when I was closing out an old chapter for good. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "How have you been?" he began, voice lower, slower than I remembered. "I've been well," I said simply. "Still working non-stop as always. I've followed everything. The gala, your speech. It made me both proud and pained." I leaned back against the cool glass wall. Pained by what, Gregory? By the fact that I wasn't strong enough to stop it. Chase. He didn't just dismantle the values I tried to uphold, he pushed the best talent out of the company like they were overhead costs. I said nothing. He continued. "I want to make it right. The board has voted, and if you're willing to return, the highest executive role is yours. Full control." I exhaled slowly, mind flashing to late-night meetings, to listening to decisions made by people who had never even met our clients. I remembered how Chase systematically excluded me from every conversation that mattered. And more importantly, I remembered the long, telling silence Gregory had maintained during those final months on the board. "I appreciate the offer," I said quietly, "but I don't need to return to a place that once saw me as disposable. I'm not bitter and I'm not seeking revenge. But I've learned something important. Sometimes we don't need to go back to finish our journey." There was a long pause on the other end. "I understand," he finally said, voice heavy. "You've moved on to a different plane. Not because of a title," I said, "but because now I get to define what value really means." We ended the call with a simple goodbye. No bitterness. No pleading. Just two people who once believed in each other now accepting that some things can't go back to what they were. That afternoon I sat across from Elijah Burnett in the main office. On the table between us was the official merger contract between our operations and an international financial technology group based in Zurich. "Have you reviewed everything?" Elijah asked, eyes studying my expression. "I've gone through every clause," I nodded. "But there's one thing I want to confirm before signing." "Go ahead," he said. "After signing, I won't just represent the regional side. I'll serve as the global CEO of customer strategy. That means I'll be responsible for coordinating all 3 systems, the US, Europe, and Southeast Asia." "That's right. And you'll have full authority over staffing, structural design, and all new integration policies." I nodded again. "I'm signing," I said firmly. Elijah couldn't hide his satisfied smile. "You just changed the structure of the entire financial services industry. You may not realize it yet, but what you're doing isn't just expanding a company. You're rewriting what human value means in a system that's long been ruled by sterile profit." I smiled softly. "I'm just doing what I've always believed in, Elijah. When people feel heard, remembered, and respected, they don't leave. They stay. And they bring loyalty with them." I signed the final line. There were no fireworks, no applause. Just a deep, quiet clarity that I had stepped into new territory, not to look back but to open the next door with my own hands. 6 months after signing the final merger contract, I was invited to speak at the Leadership and Human Value Reimagined Summit, an annual event held in Dallas that brought together over 400 senior executives from finance, tech, healthcare, and education. When I walked into the main auditorium, the eyes that turned toward me weren't filled with pity for someone who had once been fired, but with a rare respect for someone who had challenged a seemingly invincible system, with integrity. I took my seat in the front row, my lanyard displaying my name and title beneath. Global Chief Executive of Customer Strategy, Newcrest International Group. I knew I wasn't the most celebrated speaker of the day or the one with the flashiest sales numbers. But when the moderator stepped onto the stage and called my name, nearly the entire room turned their gaze toward me. I stood and walked to the podium. Not with nerves, but with a feeling I hadn't felt in years. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I just needed to speak from what I had lived. Good afternoon, I began slow and clear. My name is Narissa, and maybe some of you know me not for the deals I've signed, but for the way I was removed from my former job. A few scattered laughs echoed in the room, not mocking but understanding. I worked for 26 years at an investment firm I once considered family. I wasn't fired for misconduct or poor ethics or bad results. I was removed because short-term metrics couldn't capture long-term human value. I was labeled no longer aligned with the company's new growth strategy. And then, as you've probably read, I was replaced by spreadsheets and cost-cutting forecasts. I looked around and met the empathetic gaze of an older woman in the third row. Her expression held a kind of silent resonance. But what brought me here today isn't the story of being fired. It's what happened after. After I was deleted from every system, every client list, every meeting. After being called a budget burden, I started over, not for revenge but to prove that people are never just costs. I paused, letting the room settle. My team and I, people who were once overlooked, built a client system based on the one thing that can't be measured by ROI: trust. No gimmicks. No expensive gifts. Just timely calls. Relevant messages. Remembering their families' names. Listening when they needed it and staying quiet when they didn't want to talk. I glanced down at the paper in my hand, then folded it. I didn't need it anymore. From here on, I spoke from the words etched into me by experience. I realized something: technology can be bought. Assets can be bought. Even strategies, at least temporarily, can be bought. But trust cannot. Trust is the result of consistency, sincerity, and the willingness to take responsibility when things don't go as planned. A quiet round of applause began from the back of the room. Kept going. Some people once said I no longer had market value. But 6 months later, I'm overseeing 34 international partners. A few who once sat on the former executive board are now requesting partnerships with my company. I'm not saying this to boast. I'm saying it to remind you, and myself, that a title doesn't define a person. It's how we hold on to decency while being treated unfairly that shapes who we are. I paused, looking out over the attentive room. I didn't bring anyone down, I said, my voice steady now. They pulled their own foundations out from under themselves when they stopped treating people as the bedrock. That final sentence landed like an unpolished truth. I saw the woman in the third row stand, followed by a young man with an investor tag, then another. And within seconds, nearly the whole room was on their feet. No thunderous cheers. Just steady, grounded applause, like a silent acknowledgement that didn't need to be said aloud. I bowed slightly and stepped off the stage, without the speech, without the resume. I carried only one thing with me: the truth that human value, once proven through action and trust, is untouchable. And that same truth one day will force even the largest systems to face themselves. As I walked out of that auditorium, I kept seeing those eyes, not praising me but standing for something deeper, that when people are treated with dignity, they will always be the strongest foundation for any business, any family, any community. What about you? Have you ever found yourself in a moment where the honest value you gave was dismissed? Have you had to choose between silence and standing up for what was right? I'd truly love to hear your story, about trust, about being underestimated, or about finding yourself again in the quiet. Share your experience in the comments below. You never know, your story might just be the reason someone else finds the courage to rise. And if stories like this bring you something, a little strength, a little clarity, or just the comfort of knowing you're not alone, hit that subscribe button. Because life isn't just about contracts and high-rise boardrooms. It's about family dinners, forgotten voices in small kitchens, and the quiet moments when someone at a crossroads finally finds their way.